people may not realize is that the disabled queer community is pretty large. In the US, there was a poll done that showed that 40% of trans adults are disabled. Also, 30% of cis non straight men and 36% of cis non straight women are disabled. This is compared to, the 27% of the general population that's disabled. In a previous live stream I did on autism and LGBTQ, I went over how autistic people are far more likely to be queer. With such a large number of disabled queer people, you'd think that we'd be a recognized group of the queer community, but we're not. We're often looked over. Disabled queer people are fighting for equal rights on two fronts: equal rights as disabled people and equal rights as queer people. With so many of us being a part of queer activism, it seems odd that we'd be so ignored. One issue that we face within the queer community is we're often seen as disabled and nothing else. We're not allowed to have genders or sexualities. The thought that a disabled person might have a sex life can make some people feel uncomfortable. And honestly, their discomfort about that makes me uncomfortable. I'm an adult, and a requirement of interacting with me is that you treat me as such. A big part of being in the queer community is being proud of your gender and or sexuality. But by being disabled, we're denied that. A big hurdle that people with intellectual disabilities have to face is others not thinking they can actually consent to sex or even conceptualize gender. There was a story about a couple with intellectual disabilities that had to fight to get married and live together in a group home as a married couple, even though barring them from that was a violation of their rights. Because people didn't think of them as adults who could consent to such a relationship. And this was a straight couple. Queer couples have even more hurdles to face. It's this inability for people to see disabled people as more than just our disabilities that leads to a lot of discrimination and ableism within the queer community. I find it odd that this is the case, since Marsha P. Johnson, the black trans woman who had a big role in the Stonewall riots in June 1969 and was very active in the fight for queer rights, was disabled. She's celebrated whenever people talk about the history of Pride. But the fact that she was both physically and psychologically disabled, as she put it, is so often omitted. This is common with disabled queer historical figures. Their queerness is celebrated, but their disability is strangely never mentioned. Places that are seen as safe spaces for queer individuals can often be inaccessible to disabled people, including at Pride events, which I'll get into in the next section. Queer spaces are sometimes the only places queer people can be themselves without fear of violence. But when disabled queer people can't use these spaces, what options do we have? Andrew Gurza, a disabled awareness consultant, was quoted as saying, "Queer spaces tout this ideology of equality for everyone. It is more vitally important for them to become accessible first than anywhere else. If they show some effort in this area, disabled people would feel like they had a place to be safe." And I agree with that quote. Gurza was filmed in the documentary called Picture This, which is about disability and sexuality. Footage that was left out of the film was of Gurza in his power chair at the bottom of a flight of stairs into a gay bar. That flight of stairs was the only way to the entrance. The bar owner got upset that Gurza and the film crew at them because he felt that it reflected poorly on the bar. Gurza said that if you ask people why their venues or events aren't accessible, you get called a bully and are accused of harassment. Pointing out ableism within safe spaces can lead to negative repercussions for said safe spaces, which can then lead to the one who pointed it out in the first place becoming the villain of the whole situation. Because of this, disabled queer people are forced to decide if it's worth demanding our rights or to just stay quiet and not rock the boat. Asking for accessibility in queer spaces can make us look to others like we're attacking queer spaces, when in reality, we just want to enjoy them like everyone else. Of course, just because queer spaces are physically accessible to disabled people doesn't mean they're safe spaces for us. Once you're in, you have to deal with the ableism of everyone else there. Accessible doesn't equate accepted.